Wednesday, July 2, 2025. 4:18 p.m. United States District Court, Northern District of Georgia. Diddy stepped out of the courtroom into the hot, sticky wind coming from the parking lot behind the courthouse. There was no applause, no shouts, just a single strip of yellow tape stretched across the entrance of the nearby FBI office. Only 3 hours earlier, an emergency meeting there had ended in complete silence. At 8:05 a.m., the last juror on the original list of 12 was found dead. It was Mr. Luther Haskins, the former jury foreman. His body was discovered inside the walk-in freezer behind a Kroger grocery store, only 3 blocks from the courthouse. Inside the pocket of his coat, someone had placed a USB drive. What was on it hasn't been revealed. By 9:47 a.m., a backup jury was officially called in. At exactly 2:12 p.m., they entered the room to begin deliberation. Less than 2 hours later, Diddy was found not guilty on all charges. No explanation was given, no press conference, no official statement. Only one quiet question now echoes across tonight's headlines. Did justice die on the eve of Independence Day? Part 1. Courtroom emergency. A chilling morning in Georgia. The morning of July 2, 2025, began with a strange quiet at the United States District Court in Georgia. No sirens, no shouting crowds. The steps leading up to the courthouse were quieter than usual, but the security was tighter. People spoke softly, if at all. A light mist still clung to the windows as the first staff arrived. They weren't asked why they came early. The schedule for the day was never posted, which was unusual. Courtroom 4F, normally not used for major criminal cases, was the first one sealed that morning. Yellow tape, typically used at crime scenes, was wrapped around the door handle and stretched across the hallway, as if to keep even sound from escaping. A media blackout had been ordered the night before. No cameras were allowed. The names of people attending weren't shared, even with court records. Human rights groups weren't there. International observers weren't invited. Only court staff and people directly involved with the case were inside. No one mentioned Diddy's name out loud in the main hall. If people talked, they changed the subject the moment a stranger walked by. The hallway lights on the 4th floor looked dimmer than usual, but no one asked for repairs. A technician had checked the electrical system the night before but left no report behind. The lights worked, but they cast a cold, pale glow. When the defendant entered the building through a side door, no one saw it happen. There were no handcuffs, no security escort. Surveillance footage showed only a blurry silhouette from behind. He wore a long, dark gray coat with the collar turned up, almost covering his neck. His walk was steady, neither fast nor slow. The defendant's face was never clearly recorded, not because it was covered, but because every camera in the courthouse that day showed strange low resolution at the exact moments when he appeared. It wasn't a glitch that affected everything, just the frames showing him. Inside the courtroom, the new jury was already seated. No one confirmed their names, backgrounds, or where they were from. All that was known for sure was that none of them had appeared in any previously documented court records. Their appearance came with no press release, no notice from the Department of Justice, and no internal memo to court staff. Some believed they were a federal emergency team brought in quietly. Others said they were simply told to sit in those chairs, and so they did. As the opening steps of the trial began, a secret message leaked from inside the court's internal system. The last of the original 12 jurors had been found dead that same morning, not far from the courthouse. Encrypted records showed this juror had served as foreperson in the earlier trial, the one that voted to convict Diddy. Local police were blocked from investigating. Only a rapid response FBI team was allowed at the scene. They didn't speak to anyone. They filed no reports. They simply came and left. When this news quietly spread inside the courtroom, everything paused for a few minutes. There was no announcement. Then the trial resumed as if nothing had happened. The silence inside was unsettling. Not because people were whispering, but because no eye contact. Everyone stared at their papers. When the judge walked in, there were no introductions, no opening statements. She turned a page, confirmed the defendant's identity, and gave a small signal to begin. The prosecution and defense didn't speak. Instead, they handed in pre-printed documents. There was no debate, no questioning. Everything was done with the fewest words possible. The only noises were papers turning, pens clicking, and the sound of chairs shifting on the wooden floor. One witness was brought in but didn't go to the stand. They were asked if they recognized the defendant. The witness gave a single nod and walked out. There were no follow-up questions. The statement wasn't entered into the record. Nothing about this trial resembled standard federal procedure. By late morning, rumors from the lower levels of the courthouse started spreading. Some tech staff tried to open the case file on the internal server, but were blocked with a message that read, "Access denied. Emergency clearance level 4. From the 1st to the 4th floor, all legal printers were shut down. Internal phone lines stopped working. Employees tried to send texts, but mobile data slowed to a crawl, almost like keywords were being filtered or blocked in real time. Outside, everything stayed calm. No protests, no security presence. Just a handful of reporters quietly sitting on the stone steps, waiting for someone to come out and confirm that the trial was still following legal rules. But no one came. And in that sealed courtroom on the 4th floor, a federal trial was moving forward as if the public had no right to know it was happening. Part 3. Signs of fracture, stillness in the storehouse. The trial reached its final phase and the jury began to deliberate. Diddy hadn't moved. He stayed in the same position he'd been in since that morning, his right shoulder slightly leaning forward, both hands calmly placed on the table. He showed no odd behavior, no signs of being tired or nervous, just complete stillness, lasting longer than what seemed normal. It looked like he was waiting for something he already knew was coming. His lawyer leaned over and whispered to him a few times throughout the day. Diddy didn't reply. He didn't nod or shake his head. He didn't even turn to look. He simply kept his eyes straight ahead. It wasn't clear if he was looking at someone or just at a blank space on the dark wooden wall, just a few feet away. The court reporter continued typing. The witness didn't take the stand. They simply gave a single nod when asked if they knew the defendant, then quietly walked out. There were no follow-up questions. No one requested the statement be added to the official court record. Everything about this moment felt wrong. None. What if it matched any legal procedure found in federal courtroom codes? It was as if the rules no longer applied. By late morning, rumors started spreading from the lower levels of the courthouse. Some technical staff tried to open the trial file from the central server, but were blocked with a warning: access denied. Emergency clearance level 4. From floors 1 to 4, every printer tied to legal databases stopped working. The internal phone system went completely silent. Some employees tried using their personal phones to send messages, but mobile data slowed to a crawl as if some sort of keyword filter was silently blocking transmissions. Outside, the scene remained strangely peaceful. There were no protesters, no police in riot gear, just a few reporters sitting quietly on the courthouse steps, waiting for someone to come out, but no one did. And up on the sealed 4th floor, the federal trial continued, operating as if the public didn't have the right to know it was happening as the jury was told to prepare for deliberation. The defendant still hadn't moved. Diddy remained in the same position he'd held since early that morning, his right shoulder slightly slouched, both hands resting calmly on the table. There were no signs of stress, no visible fatigue, only a long, unnatural stillness, as if he had been waiting for something he already expected. His defense attorney leaned in and whispered to him a few times throughout the morning. Diddy never responded. He didn't nod, didn't shake his head, didn't turn his eyes. He just stared forward towards something that wasn't clearly there. His gaze locked somewhere along the wooden paneled wall. A court reporter seated a few meters away scribbled a note in the margin of her transcript. Not sure if he hears anything, but he doesn't seem like he's actually here. By early afternoon, something in the room began to shift. No one yelled. There were no dramatic gestures or legal objections, but people began to subtly change. Those who had sat straight began leaning back. Someone rubbed their forehead. The quiet tension that had held the room together began to loosen. Then, just as the jury was told to prepare for deliberation, Diddy moved for the first time. He slowly removed his glasses, placed them gently on the table, and closed his eyes. It lasted only a few seconds. It wasn't theatrical, but it was long enough for a security officer in the corner to quietly loosen his hand from the strap on his holster. When Diddy opened his eyes again, his gaze had changed. It was no longer fixed or distant. Now, he scanned the entire room, his eyes moving from the ceiling to the base of the table, then across the hallway, the witness stand, and finally stopping on a ventilation grate above the prosecutor's desk. No one else seemed to notice except for one court clerk sitting in the back. She looked up, met his stare, and instantly looked away. The official court transcript for the day didn't mention it, but internal surveillance footage still classified. An unreleased captured the moment clearly. Diddy didn't blink, his face didn't twitch. He sat completely still, eyes locked on the grate above the prosecutor's desk. UNMOVING. As the jury entered the deliberation room, something in Diddy shifted again. He began moving in his seat more often. The stillness that had defined his presence all day was finally gone, and what replaced it was harder to understand. Diddy began to move slowly, subtly. He rubbed his hands together, let them fall, then repeated the motion. His left leg started to shake slightly. His lawyer leaned over to ask him something, but got no response. For the first time that day, Diddy rested his chin on his hands. It was a gesture commonly seen in confused or overwhelmed defendants, though in his case, it looked more like something he had been forcing himself not to do until that moment, almost like it had been scheduled. There was no outburst, noisy, but his posture began to fall apart. His back hunched, his head tilted forward. No one could tell if it was exhaustion or a calculated act. A security officer walked past to close the door to the jury deliberation room. At that exact moment, Diddy lifted his head and looked straight at him. He didn't speak, he didn't smile. There was no expression of threat. It was just a sharp glance, like someone quietly taking note of another person's presence. No one at the prosecution's table seemed to react except for a legal assistant in the back, who opened a laptop and began typing quickly. No one knew what was being typed. The assistant never looked up again for the rest of the session. Diddy shifted again in his seat. The small object slipped out of his suit pocket. A security officer picked it up, asked no questions, and placed it back on the table. It was a silver-gray handkerchief with a dark blue border. No initials, no markings. Diddy never touched it again. It stayed there until the session ended later. He closed his eyes for a second time, this time for much longer. No one interrupted him. His lawyer leaned in slightly but didn't speak or interfere. A few minutes later, Diddy opened his eyes, looked at the empty witness stand and smiled. It was faint. It lasted just a moment. It wasn't caused by anything specific and didn't trigger a reaction from anyone in the room. But it was the only expression he had shown all day, after the trial. A restricted internal report included one psychological observation made by an independent judicial monitor. It read, "The defendant did not seem afraid, angry, or even satisfied. Every gesture appeared as if it had been expected, rehearsed, or previously known." That was the only behavioral comment approved for inclusion in the official archive. All other data like his pulse, body temperature, or neurological signs was locked under a higher security clearance. When the jury room door finally closed, Diddy stood up on his own. He walked 2 steps away from his bench, then turned back. The judge and his lawyer showed no reaction. A guard raised a hand, signaling for him to sit again. He did so without question. But one thing changed. His gaze no longer faced forward. From then on, he looked at a 45-degree angle to his left toward a bare corner of the room. There were no people there, no cameras, nothing, and he never moved his eyes again. That stillness held all the way until the verdict was delivered. The verdict was printed on a plain sheet of paper, no official seal, no heading, and no case number, which is typically required. There were just 2 lines of text left aligned in standard font, with the line spacing tightened unnaturally close. No one double-checked it. No one asked for it to be read aloud. The judge took the slip of paper from a jury member, nodded once, folded it, and placed it on the desk. Then, looking directly at Diddy, she said 2 words in a flat, emotionless voice, "Not guilty." There were no gasps, no applause, no visible reactions from the jury, the attorneys, or court staff. The jury members didn't look at the defendant. They didn't glance at the prosecution or the plaintiff's side. They stood up silently, one by one, and walked out. No goodbyes, no acknowledgments, no expression of relief or pride, just a silent exit. It didn't feel like a verdict. It felt like they had completed a task. A hallway staff member later noted in an internal report, "I couldn't hear their footsteps. Though the jurors were wearing leather shoes and the floors were tiled, they made no sound as they left." This sentence was later crossed out in red ink in the final archived version.